Okay, I put the Benelli forks on the scale. This is not a very accurate way to do this, but it looks like it's about 15 pounds. The reason is even with nothing on it, the scale shows 2 pounds. Again, this is for measuring like 1 to 200 pounds, not 15, so this is probably pretty inaccurate. But that's how much the forks weigh on our Benelli. I'm going to swap the forks on the Benelli with the ones that have new springs. So I put the bike up on the pit bull stand. I am going to take the front wheel off, axle out. I have to unbolt the caliper, and then I have to take the disc off. Once that's done, the wheel can come out, and then I can unbolt the clamps for the fork, slide the fork out, put the new fork in, and we should be done with that job. Here are the tools for the front end. You need a 17 and an 18 socket, box end wrench to get the axle nut off, etc. Get the axle out. The brake disc here is a 6mm hex. We're also going to use a 6mm hex for the triple clamps to loosen those, and that should be all we need tool wise. Also have to do the big brake kit, same thing, 6mm. So tool wise, it's pretty simple. Took the 2 bolts out of the rear of the caliper bracket. This will release the caliper. You can see it's loose, but it will not come off the disc because the disc doesn't leave enough clearance between the rim and the disc. So we have to take the disc off next so we can shift it out of the way to get the caliper off. You don't have a helper to hold the brake caliper on, or brake pressure on, to keep the wheel from rotating. I just move the Allen wrench up against the fork, and then I can crack it loose just with pressure, because the Allen crack is up against the fork. Now I can take the bolts out and take the disc off. Now with the 4 bolts out, you can take the disc loose, and then it will slide forward and give us hopefully enough clearance at the back to get the caliper off. With the nut off, there is a spacer back behind this lug here on that side, and there's the speedo drive on this side. Both those have to come out. When you take the axle out, pull this out. It is a pretty small diameter axle, not as big as on some of my other bikes. But with that, then we can drop the wheel out. Dropped down, disc came off. Here's our spacer. Gonna put this aside with our bolts down there. Put the disc aside, the wheel, and now we have our wheel out. Got to take the fender off next, and then drop the forks. Getting close. Okay, there are 6 fender mounts total, both sides. Up here, these are 4mm hexes. So, ratchet them out. 6 total. Okay, bolts are out. Fender comes out really easily, actually, compared to the Grom. I don't have to fight with it as much. Pretty straightforward. Now the forks can come off. Oh, I guess I do have to take the caliper bracket off, because I'm going to put this on the new forks. Okay, with everything off on the front, quick observations. There is a lot of brake dust on here, a bunch of dirt, filth. You can see on the back side of the fork, kind of witness marks, how much of the fork travel I'm using. Looks like I have about an inch left of travel that's not getting used. Brake pads look like they have some decent meat left on them. I'm not going to replace them at this point, but they do wear pretty quickly with the use they're getting. Anyway, next item up here at the top of the fork is how much they protrude from the top of the triple clamp. This is my setting where I've placed them. So putting a caliper on it, looks like I have about 15 millimeters. So when I put the new forks on, I need to set them to the same height. Okay, the forks would not slide out by just loosening the bolts, so I put a screwdriver in, just kind of tapped it in. Same thing up at the top, pushing this straight down, that opens the clamp, and now it slides out nicely. Okay, I have 2 sets of forks. These are the ones that came out of the Benelli. These are going to go to Cole. They do not leak, so that's good. That should fix his problem. The new forks have new seals. Roger changed the oil, and then we had custom wound springs made for this. I'll put it in the description because I don't remember what weight springs he had made. Okay, the forks are slid back in. I am going to check the caliper here on the tops. 15 millimeters. Looks good. Same thing on this side. Here is something very important that I forgot about using the big brake kit from the Grom on the Benelli. That is the bracket here. What's happening is I can't get the bolts in here to fasten this bracket on. If I flip it around the back side, you'll see why. Up here at the top, there's interference between this fender mount and that bracket. Doesn't fit. So what I need to do is cut away part of the bracket. Now I had this on the other set of forks on the bike, so here is the other set of forks, and you will note that here I cut a notch in the bracket to clear that bracket. So I need to do that to the forks I'm trying to put on right now. Spacers, here's the wheel, here's the spacer, and then we also need the speedometer sensor slash spacer. May not show up at all, but what I did was I took the bracket, put it on, and then I took a paint pen and marked where I need to cut away on the bracket. This may not show up on the video here, but there's a silver line showing a notch there. So I just Sharpied that out with a paint pen, and now I need to cut it out with a Dremel. Okay, I've started right here by drilling a hole. The reason I'm drilling a hole here with the drill bit is, one, it's faster and more accurate to cut the hole with the drill. But the key thing here is that I want that to be a rounded corner where it fits in there, because there's a straight line from here to here, and then a straight line from the bottom, and that gets me a nice rounded fillet. And then all I have to cut out is whatever's left with the Dremel. Less cutting, basically. Okay, this is what I did with a hand drill, drilling a couple holes in here, etc. Now I'm gonna go back with the Dremel and clean it up along the silver line. This just basically allowed me to remove material quickly, so I don't have to spend so much time with the Dremel. Okay, after doing a lot of Dremeling up here at the top, I have managed to cut away a clearance there while still being able to retain my fender mount. I didn't take away a highly precise, accurate amount, but it now clears the bracket and I can bolt things on. Okay, with the bolts in, there is a bracket that bolts on the back, so that needs to go in place, and it's easier before putting the wheel on to mount this up. Put it on, tighten the 2 bolts, and it holds the caliper bracket to the fork. Okay, prepped to put it back together. I've greased up the axle. Nothing really slides on the axle. Remember, we're talking about ball bearings in there. This is to prevent corrosion and make sure it disassembles in the future. So, been a while since that was done, so it's freshly coated, and time to put it back in with the wheel. So we need to get our spacers in and go from there. Okay, I got the wheel put back on, the axle is installed, spacers are in. I did have to put a single bolt in the disc here. I'm going to take it back out now that the wheel is on. The reason for that is I still have the caliper that I have to mount to the fork, and I can't do that if the disc is in place. So I have to break it loose and let it kind of rotate forward so that I can slip the caliper onto the disc. Okay, with that all oriented with the disc loose, I was able to easily slip the caliper on. I'm going to bolt it back up and then reattach the disc. Okay, I put in the top bolt. One thing I wanted to remind is that when putting in the bolts, these are cap screws, which means I don't have a way to safety wire those. So Loctite, make sure you put Loctite on it, because that's the only insurance you have against this potentially loosening. I don't like this design. I'd like hex bolts that can be safety wired, but I don't know what to do for cap screws. Okay, I've got the front brake back together, Loctited the bolts, put the fender back on, put the bolts back in for the fender. Looks like we're all good there. The wheel spins. Bolts tightened, bolts back in, fender on, nice and solid. Last thing I'm doing up here is tightening up the clamp bolts again. And that should finish things up. I also needed to pump up the master cylinder. I got good brake pressure, feels good. I am using a special socket here just to make sure it grips. Don't want to strip a bolt out. Okay, that's it. Time to take it off the stand.